God says, of all the things I've created, and they're all perfect, of all the things I created, I like this, I don't like that. Give me this, don't give me that.
So what you're now saying is basically God likes these things but doesn't like these things, but he's not able to just give you these things because he needs these things, otherwise he couldn't give you these things he likes.
It's not what he gives you, it's what you're choosing for him. He wants you to give him the pleasure, he doesn't want you to give him the pain, which he created.
Okay, I mean, I think you're really, really going way out on a limb into the mystery and trying to impose these ideas that I think are way further, again, than the communication story that we're having a problem with. Now you're like really making some major assumptions about this. God wants you to do this, and he wants you to do that.
You don't expect Torah to be making some major assumptions.
Well, we already agreed that Torah is a horrible communication device.
But first find out what it's trying to say.
You're telling me all the time.
So I told you once the story. I was sitting in a barber shop and I was sitting next to an elderly chassid who survived, like, I guess, the gulags in Russia. And I was trying to convey this point in the most respectful manner. And he screamed at me at one point and said, "Was kriegst du in Atzmus?" Why are you digging in places you don't belong? Like, as much as I love the idea and understand it as you know, as I have over the last several years, what's hard for people, I guess, is we're going to the most delicate, the holy of holies, the most private of private essence, that she'ein l'mayla himenu, that there's no deeper to go, and we're talking about it in such a clear, open, precise, no room for wiggle room. God needs you. God needs your mitzvah. And they say, "Was kriegst du in Atzmus?" What gives you the chutzpah to talk about it so bluntly and so unsneezely, if you will?
That is a very good argument. But first of all, not he needs your mitzvah. It's never your mitzvah, it's his mitzvah.
Right. Sure.
He needs your performance of the mitzvah. So it is true that when we talk about God, we need to be highly respectful. But you're not talking about a guy next door. So speaking about God should be an awesome and awe-inspiring conversation. In fact, when the Alter Rebbe, when he would teach, he would often speak about the four worlds. The lowest world is Asiya. Then there is Yetzirah, closer to God. Then there's Bria, closer to God. And then there is the world that is most close to God, and that is Atzilus. The Alter Rebbe, when he would try to say the word, the name of that highest world, would panic or would be incapable of completing the word. He would say Atzir, Atzir, and he wouldn't finish it because it was so awesome. So if we should be incapable of even pronouncing the name of the highest creation, how in awe must we be if we're talking about God himself? This is correct. In fact, somebody said, I think very wisely and sensitively, they asked me if I believe in God. What am I supposed to say? Yes. Do you know what it means to believe in God? Can anybody just say, I believe in God? Because if you do, why do you act the way you act? Why are you the way you are if you really believe in God? So be careful what you're saying. It's not a slogan to say, oh, yeah, I believe in God. I'm a believer. Not by your behavior, you're not. So to say I believe in God should be an awesome, fearful thing to say. If you're that sensitive. In fact, we should be terrified of studying Torah. These are the words God uttered at Mount Sinai. And you're going to sit there with your child, your 3-year-old, and you're going to repeat with him, Torah tziva lanu Moshe, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu. What are you doing? You should be too frightened to say the words. Was kriegst du atzmas? Yes, absolutely true. But by the same token, how dare you memorize a Mishnah by heart? This is God's Torah. And nobody says, oh, learning Mishnah is too scary. Is that good or bad? God makes himself known. God makes himself available. Ata hareisa ladas. You revealed yourself so that we would know. When you know, the awe is not as great. So does God want to remain in awe, or does he want us to get to know him and become close? Awe and closeness are opposites. Chassidus says, since the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, what Hashem wants is closeness. And that's why the simple Jew who doesn't know enough about God to be in awe, but makes a bracha and does a mitzvah because he feels a closeness to God, that is greater than any scholar. So this is not a new idea. And it's certainly not my idea. And it's not a one person's. But to say, hey, if you want to talk about that, be a little more circumspect, be a little more sensitive. And it's so true. Because once we realize that God really does need your mitzvah, well, shouldn't you do the mitzvah differently now? Shouldn't that change us completely? It should, and it does. So those who say, you're being a little too careless with this conversation, correct. Thank you. But not to have the conversation?
I was just reading a quote by Jeff Bezos, the owner of Amazon. And he said something, in order to innovate, you have to be willing to be misunderstood. Any innovation can't come without being misunderstood. And I was thinking, obviously, in context of this course and this topic. And then I thought about God himself. Coming down to Mount Sinai was pretty scary for him, revealing himself, his vulnerabilities. And, what did he reveal at Mount Sinai? Like, some basic things like honor your father and mother, and then things like don't mix wool and linen. Right? People could laugh at that. I know when I go on YouTube or I speak publicly, I'm fearful, and it's not as crazy as mixing wool and linen. So I thought back to all those Hasidic discourses, which I learned back in yeshiva, which constantly stressed tzimtzumim, and we just so casually or flippantly translated it as contractions. Yeah, God contracted himself. And I thought maybe contracting himself meant he's like, I can do this. It was like a contraction, like during labor. I'm revealing I can't, he's building worlds, destroy, and it's coming from Atzilus to Bria, I can do this. I can expose myself. And that's why we call it, like you say, the revelation at Mount Sinai. He was revealing his deepest essence. This is me, and it can't be any other way. It's not optional.
This is correct. So where is all the misunderstanding coming from? So it's a little different from if you're innovating, you should expect to be misunderstood. The misunderstanding already exists. We're just trying to correct it. Where is the misunderstanding coming from? If we're honest about it, the yeshivas, the best yeshivas in the world, don't offer any course on getting to know Hashem, getting to know God. There's no such course. We learn about the mitzvahs, we learn about the commandments, we learn about the do's and the don'ts. We learn about the application, when it applies, where it applies, how it applies. And it's brilliant and it's awesome and it's holy, but there's very little about God himself. So the graduate of the greatest yeshiva is not equipped to even have an intelligent conversation on this subject. They simply were not taught. There's a little bit of, in your spare time, you look into a Musar Sefer, or you look into a philosophy Sefer, but God is, and everybody recognizes this, God is a neglected subject. In some yeshivas, you're not even allowed to talk about it. You're not allowed to talk about God. Why? Because once you start, you're going to realize that too many unanswered questions and it's going to discourage you. So better to stay away from the subject. Now, this is tragic. Stay away from God because you're in yeshiva? This can't be. One of the reasons the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, we're told, is because people didn't make the bracha on the study of Torah before they studied the Torah, which means it kind of became irrelevant as to who gave the Torah. When you make the bracha, you remind yourself, I'm about to do the mitzvah of studying God's Torah. He commanded it, it's his Torah. Now you study, you get a little closer to him. But when the Torah stops being his Torah, when he becomes irrelevant, then the study of Torah is affected. So it's crucial, it's necessary. We cannot avoid this conversation because the real danger is in thinking that he doesn't need.
And which leads to another book that I'm reading based on some old sort of wisdom about how to be successful in life. And the title of the book is The Courage to be Disliked. That anyone that has sort of transmitted some wisdom or had success always had the courage to be disliked, because that opened up the possibility for those that were willing to hear it and to live by it, which also made me think of God. When he had to create the world and also, give the Torah, he had to have the courage to be disliked, to be hated.
Who disliked him?
There's some people throughout history. And
the conversation itself is a huge mitzvah. So however people come to, whatever conclusion people will come to, having the conversation will enrich everybody's Yiddishkeit. It will enrich everybody's performance of mitzvahs, and it will bring a whole new enthusiasm to Jewish life. And that's what it's all about. So it's not a question of convincing people. It's a question of getting people to think. Because when you think about something, you're more invested. You're more invested, you're more enthusiastic. You're more enthusiastic, you have more joy. You have more joy in Judaism. Bingo. That's the prize.
And I guess that's why we say by Shavuos you should be mekabel the Torah b'simcha uvepnimis. There's no greater joy once you internalize and you sort of get a broader understanding and see the forest from the trees of what you're receiving and who's affected by it. And is it safe to say now that obviously Hashem, God is listening to this and thinking to himself, finally, after thousands of years from the beginning of creation, they're finally getting to know me. And this course is going to the heart of who I am. And krichin atzmus, dig away. I want you to get to know me. I want you to understand who I am and how not optional or not voluntary it was. I need you. I need the mitzvah. Every human being is infinitely needed. And he's overjoyed at just hearing this conversation and can't wait to see what happens next week.
And it is quite a compliment to the Jewish people, if you think about it. God spoke to us one time, 3,300 years ago, and some change, and hasn't spoken to us since. And 3,300 years later, we are discussing what he likes most, how much he wants, how big the need. Is it a need? Is it a want? Of course, this gives him it has to give him such nachas to know that he chose the right people. Anyway, this is a very worthy conversation.
Okay, looking forward. Thank you for everyone for participating. Everyone should have a great Shabbos and see you next week.